I recently had the pleasure of chatting with Andrew Haller. Andrew studied economics at Stanford and then went on to do an MBA at Harvard before eventually co founding Airdev, which is one of the top no code development agencies in the world. In our chat, Andrew shares the story of how he came across the world of no code and Bubble, as well as how he went on to co-found Airdev with Vlad. He shares some really great lessons and stories from his journey about life, about startups, about business. He also dives into what he thinks the future of no-code and software development will look like over the next 5 to 10 years. I learn a lot from Andrew's story, and I'm sure you guys will as well. So without further ado, that's enough from me. I'll kick it over to the recording. So welcome to the podcast, Andrew.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to diving into your story a lot. But I wanted to start the podcast off, right back at the beginning. Where did everything start for you?
So I suppose I can start in college. That's sort of when the formative years begin. And so, yeah, I studied econ and did not know what I wanted to do afterward. Just assumed I would be in an office somewhere after graduating. And as with a lot of schools, there were these big name companies would come and do a lot of recruiting, and so a lot of banks and consultancies and things like that. And so I kind of got swept up into that flow and made it into a consulting position. So I worked at McKinsey for a few years, and I think it was really great just to learn how to be a professional because that wasn't something I covered in college. I learned a lot of interesting academic things, but learning how to be independent and kind of manage upward with your managers and learn how some businesses work and get a good broad survey of different types of industries and types of business problems and things like that. So for me, it was good to kind of get that overview. And then, yeah, I ended up moving to another organization called Teach for America. They're a nonprofit, education nonprofit in the U.S. and did some strategy work with them. Again, I think my early career was just let me not think too much about what I'm going to be doing in 15 years from now, but just am I doing something interesting today? And if not, what's kind of the next thing that might be cool for me? And so that's kind of how I ended up doing some work with Teach for America and stayed there for 3 years in a few different jobs. And that was kind of the first time that I got a little taste of technology because we would roll out some different, tech systems and build things. But for me, I was never the technical person. I was analytical, so I could kind of talk to tech people and explain what I wanted or how something should work. But never did any coding, never did any product work per se in there. And then I think really the first time I considered being an entrepreneur was after it had been a few years at Teach for America, and this was kind of the beginning of trying to make a more concerted effort to get on the entrepreneur path. And so I asked a bunch of people I knew who were entrepreneurs, what should I do? How should I get into starting a company? Should I go to business school? Should I do this sort of training? And they said, no, 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 don't do any of that stuff. Just jump in, just, start something right away. Um, or at the very least, find a mentor and be sort of a chief of staff type person with an inspiring entrepreneur and just kind of watch how they do it. But definitely don't go to school. And I didn't listen to them. I went to school anyway. And for whatever reason, for me personally, just the way that I think I get into new things is sort of cautious. I kind of need to learn the theory first. I need to kind of get myself comfortable with where the risk is and how I want to take it on. And so even though everybody was shouting at me, don't do it this way, I just felt like it would be the best way for me to, take a couple of years in business school and have kind of that flexibility to explore new things and dabble in entrepreneurship without having this risk of I might have wasted my whole time because I'd still end up with this, shiny degree at the end of it. And so that was kind of the beginning of where I got interested in entrepreneurship, which ultimately led to starting Airdev after that. So that was kind of where I got my start and how it kind of evolved into this itch to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that kind of itch started at Teach for America, where you were kind of thinking about going into that entrepreneurial journey. Yeah, what was it about that period that made you kind of really consider going that direction? Because I imagine that would have been a great job, and it's a completely different path to go down founding a company. Like, what was the I guess catalyst that made you make that pivot?
If I think about it, I probably had the itch a lot earlier, but I kind of pushed it off a bit. Being at Stanford as an undergrad, a lot of people are trying to be entrepreneurs and tech entrepreneurs. And I had a little bit of, not wanting to go that path and be sort of the Valley dreamer. And so at the time, it was almost like going into a more mainstream job was the less trodden path and sort of the counterculture thing to do. And so I kind of pushed it off for a while and did some more mainstream stuff. But yeah, ever since I was younger, I did little businesses here and there of, math tutoring in middle school, or doing like a tennis clinic, my own tennis clinic for kids, or little things like that, right? Where I probably had that itch from the beginning. And my mother actually started a company late in her life or career, and so I probably had a little bit of that in my blood from the beginning. But I think I came back to it at Teach for America because um, perhaps a bit naively, I sort of felt like, okay, I've got my bearings in the working world now. I kind of understand what I know and what kind of options are out there. And so now what's the next challenge for me? Maybe try to go do it myself. It felt like my alternatives were either going back into consulting, or being a part of a bigger company that just felt a little less exciting to me. So yeah, that's probably how it was more like coming back to that itch I had had for a while, if you will.
That's cool to hear. So it was kind of in your blood, but it was kind of took time to fully come out. That's really cool. So then you're at Harvard. You were doing an MBA there. What was your first idea? I've heard you started an idea called Ripple.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
was that journey like, and discovering Bubble through that? And yeah, what was the journey like with that?
Yeah, it's funny. The lesson that I pull from this first venture is it really comes back to stuff that people say often with an entrepreneurial journey is do something that you're really passionate about solving the problem of, that you will anyway stay up late at night or work weekends to do just for the fun of it if you're not getting paid, because there are so many challenges that you'll face naturally. And if you do it based on wanting to, follow a path, or, have a status, or you do it based on a clever idea you have, you won't have that resolve to get through all those challenges. But if you're doing it based on something you're passionate about, you have a better chance of doing that. So how it comes back to this story is, I went to business school and I said, yes, I want to start my own company. Okay, what should this company be about? And my mom, actually, who I talked about, she started a business in the music industry. And so she's kind of a curator, and she's met a lot of bands, and she would actually have bands sleep over at our house when they were passing through town, because they all these emerging artists, they pile into a van and they drive all their stuff, and they're all sleep deprived and sleeping in the back of their van and stuff. And so they'd stay at our house in our basement, and they'd put on little concerts for us in the living room, and then we'd invite friends over, and then more friends, and they became kind of a staple in our local town. And so, not having other great ideas myself, I thought, okay, could I make this platform that would help super fans of emerging artists connect with those artists? And so the artist, if they're going on a mini tour and driving their van around the Midwest, let's say, they could find a different fan to stay at their house and do a house concert for each night. And so could I create a tech platform that would allow these bands to say, here I am and here's where I'm going, create a concert for me, and then other people could kind of pay and sign up for those concerts. And so it was a clever idea, and it was rooted in something that was my mom's experience and passion. So I was kind of adjacent to it. But, really for me, I thought, ooh, this is a very cool marketplacey type idea, and I can then be a, big, famous, fast growing marketplace like Airbnb and Uber and all those guys. And I think at the end of the day, um, my heart wasn't in solving this pain point as much as it needed to be. So in any case, in order to create this platform, this is where I came across this tool called Bubble, which is how we build all of our applications today. And so they were this very early stage company, and I was not a technical person by myself, and so I, you know, as a non-technical founder, you think, okay, do I have a friend who's a coder who could be my co-founder? Do I have money to spend on, a tech agency? Can I raise a bunch of money? Do I have skills myself? I had none of those options. And so um, these guys who started Bubble, Josh and Emmanuel, they happened to be, on some newsletter that I was a part of, and it said, hey, you don't have to be a tech person to build your own, web application anymore. You can use Bubble to build it yourself. And I think had I been more savvy in the tech space, I would have been very skeptical of that promise, and I never would have followed that link. But I ended up being able to go chat with them and learn about the platform that they were doing, and it just this visual programming, which I can talk a bit more about later. It felt to me like PowerPoint and Excel and things that I knew really well, and it just kind of made sense to me and clicked. And so I started building this platform called Ripple Concerts, and recruited a few bands that my mom had known, and sort of got their pages set up and whatnot. And we maybe hosted one or two concerts through that, but really didn't get it off the ground. And part of the reason I think why we didn't was I got so enamored with building this platform and working in this new tool called Bubble. And that was the thing that I ended up spending my nights and weekends on, was just more features and cool designs and making this product. But you make a product, that doesn't mean anybody's going to come see it or do anything with it, right? So I wasn't doing the hustle on the side to bring both sides of the marketplace together and kind of facilitate it and fake it till you make it and hack it together. I was building stuff. So that concept kind of didn't ever go anywhere. But in the meanwhile, I sort of accidentally became this full stack engineer using this Bubble platform. And my friends from Stanford who were CS majors and developers were like, well, how'd you build that so quickly by yourself? That doesn't make any sense. That would take me months and months to put that together. And I started kind of putting two and two together and saying, oh, this what now is called NoCode, but this visual programming approach, it seems like people think this is cool. Like maybe I should keep doing it myself. So it's kind of funny and ironic how this one failed attempt into entrepreneurship, which thankfully I had sort of afforded myself the time to try and fail, because I was kind of protected by this MBA thing. It kind of led to this, to what ended up being Airdev without me really, having any sort of plan to do that at all. But yeah, Airdev, I think my passion in Airdev has stayed a lot more, because at the end of the day, I love building things and really believe that this is a way to, solve some problems. So yeah, that was kind of the origin story there.
That's really cool to hear how it's almost kind of like as you were studying Ripple, you almost like kind of stumbled across an even cooler idea, which is the no code space. So it's almost like this natural progression of falling into something cool. And it kind of the passion that you had for building, as you were saying, almost kind of made you move in that direction of ruling out the Ripple concepts and going in this path, which is really cool, I think. And then so you went on to start Airdev with Vlad. Yeah, what were the early days of Airdev like? Did you have to do a lot of convincing of people to start doing no code, or like I imagine it wasn't as mainstream as it is today, but yeah, what was it like in the early days?
Yeah, so I did go back to consulting after getting my MBA. So I had this sort of, eureka moment of I'm a full stack engineer, but I didn't at the time know what to do with that. Bubble was very, very new. It still couldn't do a lot of things. I didn't really believe that I could turn that into a business per se. And so I just got along kind of building things for fun, by myself, nights and weekends, and building things for friends and doing a little freelancing here and there. But I went back to the consulting gig and I ended up doing that for a year. But really the start of Airdev was there was a company in San Francisco where I moved back to that their CTO knew the one of the founders of Bubble, and this company called Dividend Finance was this very new startup, and they had built their whole platform using another traditional tech stack, and they had utterly failed to build this thing. It was buggy. It had gone way over time. They were kind of stuck, and their whole business depended on it. And so, as sort of a last ditch desperation move, they said, "Okay, can we try to rebuild this very quickly using this Bubble tool that through a friend of a friend?" And so the Bubbles team said, "Okay, well, there's one guy who is building a lot in Bubble. His name is Andrew. Why don't I connect you to this guy?" And it was the summer between my business school and going back to consulting. And so I said, "Yeah, I've got nothing to do. I kind of need to pay the rent before I get a salary going. And so, yeah, I'll just come over to your office and build stuff." And in about a month of my sort of part-time effort, I had rebuilt this whole thing that they had taken, 6 months and kind of failed to build. And it stuck. And then, they continued to build it while I was doing my day job. And then ultimately, Vlad, my now co-founder, so he and I had been bubbling together. We were the two people in our business school class who had found this thing, and we would sort of help each other learn it and all that. And so he had quit his job recently out of business school and was looking for things to do. And so I connected this dividend finance company to him and said, "Okay, I'm not available anymore. I have a job now, but this other guy can help you out." And so he ended up being their guy. But essentially, a paycheck from that company was the thing that allowed us to allowed me to quit my consulting job, and gave us that initial confidence to start Airdev, because they could pay us not a lot, but something every month that would allow us to, pay our bills so that we could actually survive and give it a go. And so that was the very first, the early start of Airdev was, okay, this one company is paying us a little bit of money every month. Let's kind of try to survive on that and try to find some other people. And so, yeah, in the early days, I mean, it was just the two of us, and we had to do everything. And we basically had to we really downplayed the whole Bubble and NoCode thing. NoCode was not a space. There was no term around it. It was a pure liability of like, what is this weird tech stack that doesn't make any sense? And so we would just say, if you want an application built and you don't care how, and you're, a non-technical person and maybe you wouldn't know the difference anyway, come to us. We're the guys you come to if you're super desperate and have no money and have no time to do anything. That was kind of our calling card. And so we kind of built up a few, desperate clients, and we did a nice job with them because we were smart enough guys, and we kind of stuck with it. And yeah, eventually, after a year of doing everything ourselves, managed to get ourselves into a confident enough spot where we could hire a few other people. And that was kind of this test where we knew we could do it, but we weren't sure, can we teach others to do this as well? Can we kind of maintain the standards that we've had? But yeah, the early days were very difficult to try to find clients and stuff. We built a little tool using Bubble that would send us a text message every day that said, "Did you close any new projects today?" And then you would text it back, and you would either say yes or no. And if you said no, it would ridicule you. It would say, "You idiot, you're worthless. Try again tomorrow." And so we tried to create different ways to just incentivize us to just stay out there and try to sell people and try to build the business. But I'm not sure how effective that nagging, text tool was, but it's kind of whatever you can do to keep yourself going in the early days.
Yeah, I can imagine the early days, yeah, would have been so different to now. Because I mean, obviously now you guys are really one of the leading agencies in the whole no code space. So I imagine you don't have to do tons of outreach to clients or anything like that. But it's kind of cool to hear what the early days were like when people didn't know about no code and what that process was like. Um, yeah, like was it scary or like I guess like did you ever feel nervous quitting your job to go start a business? Like, yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, I guess I would say yes and no. I feel like one really cool thing about sort of the time and also, in California, just the vibe is that people are pretty accepting of the path of going and trying something on your own. And then kind of the worst case scenario is that you fail miserably, but you kind of turn it into a story of like, well, we were pursuing this thing and we got this, we built all this and we did these trials. And then we determined based on the scientific method that we invalidated our idea and it was great that we did. And now here I am again looking for this job. Like it's not really a story of, abject failure and now you're out of the market. So I mean, certainly I thought about opportunity cost because, if you stay with your company, you can get to the next rung of the ladder. You can kind of stay on that path. And by stepping off the track, you kind of, you're freezing yourself in time when others are continuing to move forward. So that was there. But I didn't feel too much like if I take this and it doesn't go somewhere, I will be dead in the water and I will have wasted my whole career. And I think that's still true today that just even globally, sort of Silicon Valley and the power that all the tech companies have is kind of rubbed off on the rest of the world where um, there's kind of a certain sense, at least, in tech entrepreneurship of, everybody kind of lands on their feet unless they're a schemer and end up in jail or something. So that was there. I do think I was afraid of just finances and living in an expensive place like California. Could I actually afford to keep paying my rent and student loans and stuff like that? So that made me nervous. But that kind of got back to that one initial client that was paying us enough where we wouldn't be just sort of burning our savings and going out of business right away. That was the key for me at least to have confidence to jump into it.
That's really cool to hear. Yeah. Um, so I guess now, so you've been running Airdev for almost 9 years now,
Yeah.
which I imagine would have been an awesome journey. What have been some of the, I guess, special moments or special projects or things along the way? I know you mentioned dividend finance, which I saw was a case study on your website. Um, and I saw you built like notrealtwitter.com, which I thought was a very funny one
Right.
as well. But yeah, what were
Yeah.
some of the special moments along the way that yeah you reflect on a lot?
Yeah. It's nice for you to ask me to pull out the really high moments. I will say as a disclaimer, when you're running a company, there are highs and lows, right? It's just a roller coaster, right? So probably for every really cool, exciting story I can tell, there's also a story of desperation and doubt and self-loathing and all of that good stuff. So it comes with the territory. But yeah, I guess there are milestones that we hit, whether it was, making a certain amount of money in a month where we're like, wow, we're a legitimate business now. There's sort of recurring revenue coming in. We're not just kind of scrapping around month to month. So that was pretty cool. Like, for example, hitting six figures of monthly revenue or something. That those kind of milestones are fun to celebrate. Hiring our first people was like a really big thing for us because you can imagine it's just two guys sitting in a room for a whole year trying to do everything from business development to execution. We like each other, fortunately, so we never really had any of those like major, founders quarrels or things like that. We're pretty similar in the ways that are good to be similar and different in the ways that are good to be different. Um, but yeah, the first time we actually got to the point where we hired three people in the very beginning. one of whom is still on our team today. And we kind of started by creating this like free thing we called the Academy, where you could learn with us, and you would learn this bubble tool for free. And then if it went well, we would hire you at the end to work on client projects. And so it was a made up program, but we convinced a few people to jump in and try it. And fortunately, like learning how to code is a thing that lots of people were trying to do, and there were very expensive boot camps that would cost you 40 grand, and then you'd have to try to get a developer job. And so it was kind of easy in that sense to try to grab some people who wanted to get into the tech space but hadn't been before, and do that. So that was a really fun milestone, was bringing some people onto the team. There have been, yeah, really cool technical milestones. We still like to geek out on just sort of the product and technical things that we build. So we have built a framework on top of Bubble. So Bubble is point and click, and you build applications. We over the years we found some people are really great at design, some people are not so great at design. We wanted to try to have this standard level of quality to our work, and so we built essentially this framework with lots of modules and assets that you can stitch together in different ways. And in the early days, we actually used Selenium, which is this tool that you usually use for QA to kind of automate different processes, like, test the sign-in flow. We can automate that. But we actually use that to automatically use Bubble's interface to build things from scratch. So we could tell it to go over and click on a box and move that box to here, and then tell it to do something else. And so we ended up building this platform that we've called Canvas, that allows you to automatically put things into your Bubble application without you doing it manually. And since then, we've kind of turned that into more of a Chrome extension but it does a similar thing. But I definitely remember that eureka moment of like, wow, it's building by itself. This is the future, and stuff like that. And I guess I will say lastly, when ChatGPT came out, that was a really big one kind of recently, where other tech crazes in Silicon Valley have not really been as applicable to the work that we do. So, if it's crypto or drones or what have you, right? But when we played around with ChatGPT, as the whole world did at the same time, we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to change everything. And the fact that they have APIs and you can stitch them into all of your applications, it's been really fun and exciting to build different things using AI, and to talk to clients who want to build new products or stitch AI into their existing products. And recently we did kind of a fun test called Only Bots, where we made a whole social network platform, kind of like Reddit, that is populated entirely by bots. So each bot has its own personality that is created by AI, and they all go around and post things to each other and like each other's things and comment and reply, and no humans are allowed in it. You can create a bot and send it into the pool and see how it interacts with the others. But yeah, being able to work with AI has been another really cool milestone for us in the progression.
Yeah, I think that's really cool to hear, all the special moments along the way. I know you mentioned the Canvas framework there as well, which I think is really interesting, how you've kind of been along this journey with Bubble, of almost like helping Bubble grow as well. Like, I think about, as I look at your journey, all the impact you've had on not just building software for companies, but also just growing the no-code space. Like, I think about just the impact you've had on the industry with, you've got all the plugins, you've got the Canvas framework. Like, I've seen people advertise jobs saying, hey, we want a developer that knows not just Bubble, but the Canvas framework, which is like really cool. But also just the boot camp, I think is pretty amazing, because I think going back 5 or 6 years ago, I wasn't in the no-code space back then, but from what people tell me is there was such a demand for no-code developers, but not much supply. And you guys have obviously made this boot camp free to use. As you were saying, there was a lot of coding boot camps, which are, $30,000. But you did this free boot camp, which anyone can take to learn Bubble. Um, and when I've talked to, developers who've learned Bubble in the last 18 months, that, a lot of them have taken that boot camp. So I don't know, as I look at your journey, I think it's so cool to see the impact you've just had on the industry, I think.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't want to overstate our impact, and I think Bubble has really, it's been great for us that they, little did we know when we got into it, when we happened upon it in the early days, that it would be as successful as it is now. We could have hitched our tail to a wagon that was riding off a cliff. So we got very, very lucky with that, and it's been really fun to work very closely with Bubble over the years. I will say with the boot camp, as with other things that we've done, we've always tried to take the approach of building things that will help ourselves and the problems that we are encountering as we're trying to scale a business that is a business model that typically is not scalable. You don't think of software agencies as a scalable thing. They're all sort of little shops of 10 or 20 people working on a few client things. But as we were trying to grow, we had supply issues. We couldn't find enough people who were naturally learning all of the skills of Bubble on their own who we could hire. And so we had this need to create our own supply that wasn't going to be met. And so that's where the boot camp started, and why we've made it free. It's because this is how we find the people who then go into our network of builders and build things for clients. And so if we can help others build it as well, and that kind of helps grow the Bubble ecosystem, that's great. But we did it to solve our own problem. Similar to with the Canvas framework, we did that to solve our own problem too, because we didn't want to have to train everybody to be a brilliant designer, or didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And so with every build, and so we just tried to standardize as much as possible. And so we kind of backed into this strategy for ourselves, which our current mission is to set the standard in the no-code space. And it has a bit of a dual meaning. Part of it is set the standard, like be really great, so that we're setting the standard for everybody else. But part of it is much more literal. It's about creating standards through, the boot camp and the standards that teaches, through the Canvas framework and the standards that allows people to make, and through the work that we do to try to set a really high standard, because our view is something new like no code has this opportunity to become the way that all software gets created. But if it's very easy for it to die or shrivel or go into sort of a bad defensive place if in the early stages people are not using it properly and are not building great things with it. In the early days of Bubble, a lot of what people said was they made really cool apps that worked really well, and they all looked terrible. The design was terrible because it's a bunch of tinkerer people like myself kind of getting into it and building things. And so people would conclude, oh, Bubble doesn't create good designs. But that's not true at all. It's just you need a design eye and a designer to be able to do it. And so, that's kind of been the theme of what we try to do is like demonstrate that cool things can be created in this way and done very fast. And hopefully if you prove that enough times, people will keep kind of pointing to that and coming back to it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like how you explained that. I thought I'd ask you a couple of questions about where you see the future of no code going. So you've obviously been along the journey of seeing Bubble grow, and I saw you did a talk at the Zero Code conference not too long ago, and you chatted about the three types of where developers will go and the three types of ways they'll go. But where do you see the future of no code going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think no code right now, it's kind of in its adolescent stage. So there was the infancy stage where nobody knew about it and it couldn't do much. And it is a sort of classically disruptive technology, right? It it allows you to do something way faster and way cheaper, but in the early stages, it's not as good as code. It can't do all the things that code can do. But disruptive technologies, they get better and better, more sophisticated, faster than user demand goes. And so eventually they essentially catch up and they can do everything. And so in the adolescent stage now, I think there was the big boom of no code kind of broke out around the pandemic. 2022 was like a really big year for no code kind of becoming this more mainstream thing, and Bubble raising a bunch of money and a lot more awareness in the space. But I would say it's still kind of in this adolescent stage where for Bubble's user base, it is still a lot of startups. It's a lot of startups kind of building their V1, and some more businesses, big legit either enterprises or existing businesses, are really starting to get into it a lot more right now. And so the exciting thing for me is we are seeing a lot more demand from existing businesses with activities that they're trying to automate and trying to get more from less, and that's really exciting because I think it when you go from sort of scrappy little startups to big legit businesses investing in these technologies and using it to kind of to build more products that they wouldn't build before or do things in a new way, that's when it becomes mainstream. So I hope we are kind of at this tipping point now where it will be everywhere all the time in the next, few years. Sometimes I feel like we're already there, but I know it's still kind of nascent and at that starting point, like it's kind of regional at this point. France has like a huge no code, industry, and most major businesses use no code in one way or another, and that depends on a lot of factors of, of culture and how their labor economy works and things like that. But I think we're just on the precipice, and so I think what I see moving forward is that everything that so if I back up, if you're a developer right now and you're working within a company, you're a conventional developer, developers complain all the time that they spend half or more of their time on stuff they should not be using their big brains for. They're kind of building, routine applications that they could build in their sleep. They've built before. It's not novel new technologies, or they're going through, old bugs and fixing things and all that stuff. And so we really, I don't believe that no code competes, and wants to displace all the developers and take their jobs away or anything like that. It's actually a liberating concept for the hardcore developers, where they should be spending their times on really cool new problems like, new algorithms or AI things or other novel technologies. And the sort of bread and butter, nuts and bolts of most web applications should be built using no code with a much broader labor force, And so I think what I hope to see in the coming years, which is already a trend that has started, is that the number of people who call themselves software developers, will go 10x as large, and you will have lots of, business analysts within companies who they can work in PowerPoint and Excel and Word and Bubble, and they can build things within their jobs. That's kind of we get excited about the labor aspect of this, where it can be just sort of everybody can be a maker, and that will kind of drive the adoption of the tech itself. So we're really excited about that. And then I think, in my opinion, artificial intelligence even amplifies that, because all of the no-code tools and the coded tools are using AI to just automate and get more leverage out of your prompts and your ideas. And so when you combine AI and visual programming or no code, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You can make a starting point of something super fast, and then you can use your own time to kind of make the adjustments exactly the way you want in much less time than it would take in conventional programming languages. So yeah, I'm pretty excited if all that stuff moves in that direction. Who knows if it'll take a year or 10, but again, I'm kind of stuck with this because I love it and I can't stop doing it, right? So yeah, hopefully we it continues to grow.
That's really awesome. Well, before we kick off into the final segment about rapid finishes, I thought I'd ask you one last question. You've you've been on this amazing journey of changing careers, of starting a company, of going to college. As you kind of reflect back on this journey, what advice would you tell someone who's maybe 20 years old, they're at the start of building their life, or what would you go back and tell your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing I would say is I think it would be easy for me as someone who has ended up being an entrepreneur to say, hey, 20-year-old self, like just jump into it faster, like this is where you're going. Don't be afraid. It's going to work out. Jump in faster. But I don't think I would tell myself that. Like I do think that the time that I took, 5 years of working and then business school, for me, it was a lot of learning and growth that maybe I wasn't building things that I could say, oh, I stood up that product or I built this company, but it was a lot of learning. And so I do actually think I would tell myself, have patience and just try to soak up as much learning as possible. I read an article recently that was talking about how um, when you get hired by a company, they pay you some money and they get the value of what things you're building, but your learning in that role is yours. You keep that. That is another form of compensation. You're going to school for free. You're going to school and getting paid for it. And so I just think that even if no matter kind of what role you're doing in your early stage of your career, even if it's not the thing you eventually want to do, even if it stinks, if you hate your job, you can still like think about it just as a form of learning, and maybe not school if you didn't love school, not the sort of boring parts of school, but like what can I learn if I hate this job? What can I learn about how not to be a manager and be my terrible manager, or how not to run a business, or some of the struggles that companies in my industry have. I love the idea. If I were to try again to be an entrepreneur, I love the idea of starting from your personal experience to then create something. And so, any company you're in or any job you're doing, you can just look around and find the problems that they're trying to solve, and then go start a company later that sells right back to the company that you were working for before, and sells that product or service that would have been helpful in your original job. So I just feel like patience is something that not a lot of entrepreneurs will say. You got to be impatient, move fast, and break things and all that. But I just think you'll kind of know when you are ready to do something entrepreneurial if that is what you want to do. But in the meantime, just learn a lot and soak it in.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'd never actually thought about that idea of learning as compensation. That's actually a really good way of putting it. I really like that idea.
That and your airline miles are the two things you get to keep. So yeah.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, well, I thought we'd kick off into the last segment. So the last segment is just some rapid fire questions for a bit of fun to finish up. But the first one is, what is your favorite book?
I will admit I'm not great at favorites, but I will give you an answer. So a book that I really enjoyed um, that I think kind of captures the type of book that I like too. So it's called Things to Make and Do in the Fourth Dimension. So it's by this guy named Matt Parker. He's a mathematician and comedian. So two things that don't often go together. But this book it was just such a fun read for me. So the book is about math, fair warning, but it might be the book about math that brings people back to math who have been scarred by math class growing up. It's basically just a big exploration and celebration of cool things in math. And so it talks about everything from, why we use the number of digits that we do to prime numbers to the concept of infinity and all these different things. And, it's whimsical along the way because the author is a comedian. But um, uh, the thing I like about it is math. You can apply a math in lots of ways to kind of get useful things. But math at its core is just, and the people who are mathematicians, it's just sort of pure uh, isolated logic and fun abstract thinking. Like there is actually no point to it. You make up some axioms and then you go from there and you say, okay, if that's true, then what else is true? And what if I did this? And how do I figure this out? And it's just kind of people who are super curious like math. And I've always enjoyed math growing up and, don't use it very much now beyond, doing our budgets and stuff like that. But I think it's a super fun book to just kind of try to make math fun again. So I'll say that as my as the one that comes to mind.
That's really cool. I think I'll have to go and read that. I think I wasn't very good at math at school, so that sounds like the book that'll get me back into math.
Yeah, he'll bring you along. It'll be fun.
um, what is your favorite movie?
I have to go with the movie that I've said for 15 years or so at this point. So there's a movie called Rushmore. It's a Wes Anderson movie. It was kind of early-ish in his long list of films, but it had Bill Murray in it, and yeah, it was kind of one of the early movies that I watched that were not sort of your standard, blockbuster summer movie superhero things, where it was a little bit artsy, not crazy, but a little bit artsy and kind of artistic and had interesting, weird characters to it. And so I always just kind of enjoyed that movie. And I still get a kick out of Wes Anderson movies every time they come out. I try to see them, and so yeah, that was kind of the start of that interest for me.
If you could have dinner with any three people, they can be dead or alive and from any time in history, who would you choose to have dinner with?
I feel like I'll be bad at answering this one, but let's see. I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is sort of these major historical figures. Like, yeah, let's get Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Jesus together and have a dinner. But honestly, I feel like I would be a bit too nervous in such company, and I probably wouldn't be able to ask any questions or make sense. I'd probably make a fool of myself. And so I don't know. I feel like a different angle that could be interesting on this one is just kind of going up my family tree of ancestors who are like related to me, but maybe I didn't know, and maybe not going that far back, but just going back to the 1800s or something like that, and just talking to some relatives. And I just feel like it'd be interesting. They won't be celebrities, so I won't be that nervous, but I could just see, do they have traits that are similar to mine? Do I see where it comes from or not so much? And just kind of what's life like a little bit before now. And so I don't know maybe I would bore myself with that answer once I got to that dinner table, and I'd be like, man, I should have really been chatting with Jesus and Gandhi and MLK. But yeah, I'd go talk to some ancestors, I think.
That's really cool. I haven't heard that perspective before, so that's actually very cool. It'd be interesting to hear where your relatives came from and just chat to them about what life was like. That's very cool.
I'll let you know if I happen to chat with them. I'll give you the
Yeah,
update.
if you got the time machine, let me know. um, if you could go back to any one day in your life just to experience that day exactly as it happened, what day would you go back to?
I think I am legally bound to say this one, or maybe these two, but and they're the standard ones that people go back to. But when my daughter was born, when I got married, I feel like the thing about days like that is you just can't possibly appreciate them or really even experience them. It's like you black out when you're going through a day like that, and then you wonder like, what was that day actually like, And so I feel like being able to go back and actually live those days kind of with a little bit more awareness would be really nice. And they were cool days anyway, so it'd be fun to live them again. So yeah, I would definitely go to those old trusted, big personal milestone days.
Yeah, I can imagine they would have been special having, yeah, the day your daughter was born and the wedding. I can imagine that would have been very special.
Very special. They were different days, by the way. That we didn't. I didn't knock those two milestones out on the same day. So I kind of cheated with two answers, but um, I'm legally bound. Yeah,
If it
exactly.
was, that's awesome. Um, yeah, well, that kind of brings us to the end of the podcast. You've dropped some amazing wisdom, Andrew, and a lot of great lessons in there about your journey that I think the listeners will really appreciate. So yeah, appreciate you giving up your time to share that story. But before you go, yeah, is there anywhere people can go to follow your journey or follow Airdev's journey? Should they go to the Airdev YouTube or Airdev website? Where's the best place to follow you and follow Airdev?
Yeah, good question. I will admit I am not a super social media expert. So if you go to my Twitter feed, you will be sorely disappointed. But yeah, you should go check out airdev.co. That's our website. You'll get links from there to we have sort of the builder space, which is called our build hub. So that's at build.airdev.co. And so I would say for a lot of listeners out there, whether you are trying to be an entrepreneur in the future or whether you are just wanting some new interesting tool in your tool belt for your job within a company, or if you're interested in even coming and working with us on client projects, if you think that would be a cool thing to do, check out that Build Hub and our boot camp and some of the tools. And I think you'll know pretty early on if you catch the bug because um, it's quite addictive, sort of having the power to put things together. And so if you're kind of that tinkerer style person and you like working in Excel and stuff like that, you might have a knack for this sort of work. But yeah, check us out there and uh, we'll try to keep sharing what we're up to.
That's awesome. I'll put the links down to those in the show notes below for the listeners. So feel free to go and check them out. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Andrew. Yeah, really appreciate all the wisdom that you shared.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here and having a chance to chat with your audience. It was great to share an hour with you.